It's interesting you mentioned that the final sequence because I felt that that was over because in a traditional action film like when you have a scene like where a plane lands or crashes into middle of Vegas Strip like that's the climax. And then all of a sudden you see John Malkovich on top of the fire truck and I was like what just happened? It was like the anticlimax, right? And
Yeah.
it's kind of like in The Rock imagine in The Rock after those fighters,
Yes.
shoots down where Nicolas Cage was, and imagine having another ending to that. That would have killed the film because that was like a beautiful ending. I mean,
Yeah.
still, Con Air was great, but it's just I felt that I'm glad you mentioned it because I felt the same way.
Yeah. It's just funny how, again, and I don't know why Jerry did that. I'll tell you an interesting story, though. I was in the
Sure.
room with Chris Lebenzon, and Jerry was trying to get some money out of Disney to go and shoot a bunch of stuff because he knew he needed an opening that was different than just coming off the boat and going into the bar and getting into the fight. And he knew he needed these little things, other things I can talk about. But he brought Chris and I into a room, and there was, I won't say who the head of the studio was at that time, but or head of production, but he was there. And Jerry was going through this big list of all the additional, pieces that he wanted. And he was sitting there going, okay, let's go through the list. I got Glenn and Kristen here. We'll go through the list together with you, this big producer guy from Disney, and we'll go through and we'll decide which ones we really need, right? And so the list was all Jerry's, inserts and stuff. We hadn't added anything hardly, because when you're in a big action picture, you think, oh my God, why would we need that? There's so many other holes if you want to really poke stuff at
Yeah.
it. But Jerry had his set things, and so he starts going through the list, and he goes, "Oh, let's see, why do we need that?" He names off the first thing. We need a mid shot here, something, something. Glenn, why do we need that shot? And I was like, I just about out of my mouth said, "Well, you put it on the list, right?" And then I realized, oh no, this is like he's playing good cop, bad cop. I'm supposed to fumble for an answer, and if it's not good enough, he's going to scratch it and say, okay, we don't need that one. And he literally did that. He literally went through this big list that he had, and he knew which ones he wanted to favor. So he didn't ask me. He would just say to himself, well, to this big producer, oh, we need this because we've got to fix this problem. Remember, we saw that in this preview. But then if there was like one that he was kind of like staging as like one of the throwaways to give this producer a bone to say, well, I went back and I got him to cut a third of his shots out. Those were the ones he would say to me or to Chris. And I kind of went afterwards, I walked out and I said to Chris, did we just get ambushed in that meeting? What was that? And he goes, yeah, that's what he does. He works it so that, makes us look like the bad guys asking for all these shots. And then he gets he reads the room. He's seeing that the producer's going, okay, no, we've got to cut more of this. That's not enough, and he kind of reads what he's going to get. But so the ending was all shot, the beginning, and also the Lerner airfield, the bit where they come, um, the military comes down that road with all the dead airplane parts, the
Hmm.
boneyard they call it. That was all additional shooting too, because originally it was less happened. I think what happened was, if I recall, there was some second unit stuff shot, and the people that were supposed to be coming, they were kind of like rednecks with like beer and guns coming out their windows and shotguns. It was really kind of it's not what Simon wanted either, because it was all second unit shooting. So they threw it all out and we tried to cut the movie without any kind of anybody coming. And so it just sort of went after Poe and John Cusack had their little meet in the under the airplane hangar where he beats up three guys, but one guy's still in the plane.
Hmm.
Um, Poe goes into the gas station, and then somehow the other guy, the drug cartel guy, runs back in, and they just take off. And then so there wasn't this other element of somebody else, danger coming at them. And so they went back and set up that whole boneyard again, and came up with this idea, and again, I was sitting there going, oh God, we need to, cut more. You're so dying at that point, 8 months into cutting a movie, that you're going, oh God, do we really need that? But again, I think it's kind of fun because, it was another tricky thing for them to do, to open up all the, liquid gas, to like set up an explosion and then cut him off. And so it was just funny. And then, Simon even said, I don't even know why we're doing this joke about um, when they have when Cyrus lines up the different parts on the ground, and then the one tall guy goes, and he's saying, "Okay, we're here. The cars are coming here, and the plane is here." And then this other guy goes, "Well, what's that?" And then Cyrus goes, "Ah, that's a rock," and it got a huge laugh, and I thought it was funny, but. Simon found he didn't even think it was funny. It was sort of like, oh, why are we doing this? And I said, well, I think that's actually funny. And I always got a big laugh in the theater. But so that was all additional shooting that was probably done in, I don't know, probably April. Like not that, that was a fast movie that shot up until Christmas and then had a very, very fast, furious amount of editing and visual effects work. Because I was also thinking the Vegas Strip was there's the plane that's flying over, where you actually
Yeah.
in Vegas, and that's a real plane. And then there's when it starts to land, they actually built the strip on some visual effects company. I can't remember their name. Built this long on some sort of an airplane runway somewhere north of LA. They commandeered it for a couple months and actually built like this whole strip. And the plane was, oh, it's probably 15 feet, it's probably 15 feet wide. And, they were real big models. That's back in the days when they used to do that kind of stuff
Yeah.
for the weight and for the feel of it. And when it's breaking through, different buildings all the way down, they're all, buildings that were built. But what was funny was they had a windstorm like in February, and most of it got knocked down before they shot anything. And, I remember the visual effects people going, oh my God, or the special effects people going, oh my God, what do we do? It's just all fucking come down and we've got to rebuild it in 2 weeks. And it's taken 2 months just to, and I was like, oh, wow, where is it? And I actually went up to look at it because I was when they actually were shooting some of pieces of it, because I was just so amazed to see that they had this big lumbering plane that, was on these pulleys and they were doing all this stuff practically. And it was pretty cool. I thought that added to it. The only thing that was done in Vegas besides flying over it, they did crash into that actual casino because they were going to tear that casino down. And so
Mm.
they were allowing him to be, before they started to do the demolition, they allowed him to crash into that kind of entrance area. And I can remember sitting there one night with Simon because we got pretty friendly because we were back in those days, you sent the director something every couple of days, what you've been cutting. So I'd gotten to know him during the shoot really well. And so when by that time they were having us come out to show him stuff and to make sure he had all the pieces that he needed at this thing. So I'd cut something and then I'd fly out in an evening and then show him the next, that evening or the next, because they were doing night shoots. And the next morning I'd fly back and then cut. And then 2 days later, fly back and show him more stuff. And at one point, I was sitting there watching them try to take this plane, and it goes over. You can see it too. It goes over water. There's a water feature out in front of the lobby, and it kind
Mm-hmm.
of. They had a pulley that was a big, airplane wire. I don't know what kind of thing that pulls airplanes around, and it had a big pulley system so that a truck was going the opposite way of the plane. So as the idea was this they oversold it to Simon because he's sitting there telling me they say it's going to go 40 miles because he really wanted to be fast when it hit into there. If they say it's going to go, I don't know, 25, 30, I forget what he said, but fairly fast. And I looked at it and I saw this setup, and I'm going, how is this truck that's like it was like a dump truck or something is going to go fast enough this way to pull this plane, which was only about 30, 40 feet from where it was going to end up. How was it going to get the momentum to get up to that speed? And it's we ended up it went about 5 miles an hour when it actually did it. Five, maybe 10 at the most. So we had to speed stuff up. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
to see what he really wanted was like one kind of shot that showed you going over the water feature and just right into it. But it turned out to be quite a few shots to make it kind of work. But again, that's what I thought was at that time when I was just sort of getting into the real Hollywood movie business. It was cool to see big practical stuff done practically. And now I don't think anybody would ever do that. Now they just say, oh, it's CG, the whole thing.